Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. from Dad Central with my partner in Dadanomics, Drew Solon. How you doing, Drew?
I'm good, Ed. I'm liking your new terms that you're coming up. In 2023, it looks like the year of creativity for you. So I'm good. Good. Looking forward to another great conversation today. How are you?
No problem. I'm outstanding. Always loving helping dads and their families. So it's always a beautiful thing to do that. And we here at the Dad Central Show, we're sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So I agree with that. Do you agree with that, Drew?
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Good stuff. How you been? Been good?
Been good. Yeah. It's hard to believe that a couple weeks of 2023 are done, but I'm excited for this year. It's been productive in some ways. It's been relaxing in others, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm enjoying things so far.
Yeah. The dads I'm speaking with, a number of them are still in that hangover 2022. They haven't got into 2023 yet for some reason, but they're getting there. They're getting there. So looking forward to more epic conversations with yourself and the wonderful dads from all around the world that we're going to have on this platform. And we have another new friend today, so please introduce.
Well, we're having Mike Whitla today. So Mike Whitla is the founder of Rainbow Songs, and he's the creator of the Howdytoons brand. And so if you didn't know about Howdytoons, you'll definitely know more after today. But what I've learned is that Howdytoons makes rocking good songs about dinosaurs, sharks, and other prehistoric animals. Now, my kids used to sing this song all the time. I'm like, what? Baby shark. Baby shark.
Wow.
All the time. And it's like,
oh my gosh.
and I'm like, we're talking to the creator of the Baby Shark song.
What?
So, the music of Howdytoons comes from the popular YouTube channel of the same name. So there's over 50 music videos, and Howdytoons has created numerous online viral sensations, including, as I just said, Baby Shark.
So are we talking the Big Shark? So we're talking Go ahead.
Baby Shark, yeah. The fart song and our popular Dino Story and Prehistorica series they've had over 1 billion views. So the phrase is Howdytoons makes the best edu dino rock inspired by metal, prog, funk, and classic rock, which means that audiences of all ages love Howdytoons. And I'll be honest, once I checked out Howdytoons, I was like, these songs are so good. And then watching my kids react to the songs has been amazing. So we're going to be talking with Mike today, and I'm looking forward to having him.
So we're talking to the Big Shark then, right?
The Big Shark. Yes, that's right.
Well, let's bring Mike up on the platform. Welcome, Mike. How we doing today?
Doing great. Nice to see you guys. Hi, Drew. Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me on today.
Our pleasure.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
I just have to clear up one thing. Although My Baby Shark was the first video, it was actually another company that knocked it off, that got all the fame out of it. It's not actually my song. I made the first video and created the one that was then duplicated. And since I didn't write it, I couldn't sue them, which kind of taught me a very valuable lesson. Always own the IP of the things you put out, which is every other song after that. I own that IP. And anyways, I'm very proud of the songs that I have written, which I think are a lot better than that anyway, because that Baby Shark, that thing can get annoying, I have to say. But,
Some important lessons there for sure, Mike. I appreciate that, and that's important to clarify for sure. But yeah, well, Mike, it's a real honor to have you on the show. Really looking forward to this conversation. And we like to start the conversations just to get a little bit of the backstory. So if you can start, why don't you tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up for you? Where did it all get started for you?
Actually, I was born in England. My dad was studying at Oxford there, completing his PhD in English. My family, there's a lot of academics in my family. And so the first few years of my life were in England. And then but they're from Canada. So we then moved back to our home in Toronto and grew up here. And one of the things that my parents always told us that they wanted to do when raising us was to raise us with an appreciation of music. And as it turned out, both me and my sister became career musicians. I'm not sure if that's what they had planned, but one of the things that I really appreciate is their support of us pursuing those careers. Because I know a lot of people, if they decide to pursue an artistic career, their parents will say, no, 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 become a doctor or a lawyer. But it was always 100, like, you want to study this instrument? They buy an instrument and get us lessons. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Mike, I just want to jump in quickly here. Did either of your parents have a musical background?
They did, but not as professionals, as amateurs. They both could sing and read music. My dad was a kind of a bit of a self-taught piano player. He took a couple of years, but always kind of kept it in, and every now and then just goes in and pounds out some songs on the piano. But and he's a wonderful singer. He's also a clergyman, so he would lead services with singing. He would sing the Eucharist. And actually I'm not a religious person myself, but I went to see him preach again just because I enjoy seeing him do it and listening to him sing. And I appreciate their church and the things that they do, but it's been a big influence on me, and he's a wonderful singer.
I just want to delve in on just one more question about the musical growing up stage. Do you remember your first musical, either playing of an instrument or a performance?
Well, it was funny, as you talked about first, the thing that popped into my mind was the big turning point. And it kind of was my dad, when he was teaching, this would be, I'm born in 68. So early on, one of my dad's students handed him a cassette tape of Dark Side of the Moon. And he just passed it on to me. And I remember listening to that. And when it got to time and that guitar solo kicked in, it just so blew my mind. I didn't even know what instrument it was, but I knew that's what I want to do. And then I wanted to play the guitar. They got me a guitar. And then when we went, my dad went on sabbatical. So in 1979, we lived in London. And they said the guitar was too big to bring. And so I had to take up another instrument. And so for some reason, I picked the flute. And I think it was because we were in the subway and there was a quite attractive woman playing the flute. They hired her as my teacher. She actually played in an orchestra there. And she was my flute teacher there. And I played that for a couple of years. And then when I got back to Canada, I guess I would have been about 11. And it was guitar, and then just full on guitar from then on in.
All right. We could talk about guitars all day, you and me, Mike, but we're here about dad stuff. So I'm going to make sure Drew reels it back in.
This is, to me, the best part of these conversations, as we get to explore these elements. And I really appreciated the fact that, neither one of your parents, you said that they had interest in music, but they weren't professional musicians. But what they did is they saw you and your sister's interest in it, and they fully supported that. And, sure, they had no idea of whether it would become a professional pursuit of yours, but they certainly didn't stifle it or deny it or tell you you can't do it. They actually encouraged that. And I think that's a really great message, especially for dads who are, maybe have a very clear, this is, in order to be successful, or in order to be, you've got to kind of go this way and always want your kids. So can you maybe talk briefly about, what was, I mean, it sounded like it was important to you, but like, what do you think would have happened if they didn't support your music?
Oh man, it's difficult for me to imagine that. I had such a strong desire. I'm sure I would have probably figured out some other way of doing music. It was just always very clear to me that it was something that was very important to me. It took me a while to think that this can actually be my career, but I think I probably would have, it just would have been so much more difficult. And while you were mentioning that, it also made me think what I appreciated was not only did they, like my sister studied classical piano, but I wanted to play rock and roll. And they supported me. They bought me an electric guitar. Like, you buy someone an electric guitar that hasn't played one before, you're going to hear some bad sounding noise coming out of it, right? They bought me an amp. They bought me a pretty good sized amp too. So I really appreciated, and they had actually they through me, they got an appreciation for rock and roll, but they had no love for it. So that's what I really appreciated about what they did, is even though it wasn't the path that they probably and I did end up studying classical guitar too and have a great love for that. I have great love for all kinds of music. It'll be like there's good music in every genre. For me, it's just like, what's the one that speaks to you, you know? So I just constantly keep hearing new things that are amazing in every genre. It's amazing.
Nice.
Mm.
Drew, go ahead, Drew.
Well, why don't we then fast forward a little bit, and you know, you're a father. You've got two boys, and maybe if you can reflect on that early experience of your fatherhood. Maybe two parts to this. Like, so were there any important lessons that you learned from your childhood that you carried into your fatherhood? But then also, you know, did you what was it like for you seeing your children start to grow and develop, and were there things that you wanted to see in them that you maybe didn't see, or vice versa, things that you wanted to support in them, or you saw come out of them that you felt, oh, I really do need to support this in them? Anyways, just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting that with your parents, there are kind of things you want to emulate, and there's things you don't want to emulate. And I know my dad is a fantastic writer, and I know studying writing, like when my sister and I were having trouble learning to write essays, as one does, he wrote a book called Crash Course in English Grammar, and for us, and it was, that part was pretty good. But then when it came to actually working on my writing with him, he could go on for hours and hours editing something, and you know, a 14 or 15-year-old in high school has no patience for this. So it was something, and at that time in his life and his parenting, he wasn't as patient a man as he is now. So for me, it was difficult. So I was conscious of working with my kids to try and be more patient with them. But the thing that really, so that was something that I kind of took from them and from my dad and tried to improve upon. But I have to say that their support and love is something that I've always tried to emulate with my kids. And you know, you can't love your kids too much, that's for sure. And I know that it's interesting. I've thought about this. I go for a walk every morning, every Monday morning. My dad and I go for a long dog walk together. And we had a bunch, which is fantastic, but it's taken us a while to get to that point. I know there was a period of time where I didn't really see my dad in a social way. And so I kept reaching out to him, and he didn't have time for me. But I kept doing it. And finally we did, and we started going on these regular walks. We did this before I had dogs. And now that I have some dogs, we do it really regularly. And I think about this quote from Muhammad Ali, who said, a man who has the same outlook on life when he's 50 than he did was 20 has wasted 30 years. Yeah. And I think about my dad and how much he's grown through my life. His temper was quicker when we were younger, and he's grown into being such a patient man. That's taught me a lot about having more, and I have some of the same weaknesses of him, of, you know, getting angry. I have the same attention to detail for music than he had for writing. And working with my kids, my older son was ready to go all the way, always, and just take all my instruction. But my younger son was a lot like me, and had more difficulty accepting my guidance in music. So it's been a more difficult road for us doing that sort of, and both of them are very passionate about music. My oldest son, he got a full scholarship to York. He won the Oscar Peterson Award for jazz performance, which gives him, you know, financial freedom while he's studying at school, and all kinds of performance things. And now my younger son has decided recently that he wants to study jazz guitar. And he had been studying drums. So we're kind of going through that same process of working together, because music is something I can help them with studying. So it's interesting what we learn from our parents. And as you go through life, you're constantly need to be looking at how you're doing these things. and improving these things. And I feel that I try to be a more patient person. We get along so much better. It took some difficult times in our lives for us to get to this point too. He started getting serious about guitar. I lost my wife in late 2019. And days after that, he just picked up the guitar and kept playing and playing and playing. And there was a really touching moment when he was listening to me, instructing him, and we kind of realized at the same time how happy she would be seeing us getting along, doing music together, as before it was very difficult for us to do that. And we've both grown from that experience.
Well, Mike, I think I can say this company on behalf of Drew, myself, and our family, our audience, the condolences on the loss of your wife. And I know that she's looking down and she's proud of you. So that first and foremost. But I have a question. What do you get from your walks with your dad? I find this fascinating that you intentionally every Monday you're doing this walk. What do you get? Because you've basically told us where the relationship came from. What do you get with those times with your dad that you didn't have before, that maybe you were yearning for that you have now?
Man, it's been so enriching. I have sometimes, like this morning, I had a list of things I wanted to talk to him about. Through the process of, we've been brought closer together. One of the things about when you lose someone in your family that's so close to you, it can either tear you apart or bring you closer together. And so many people that we saw, their families get torn apart by these kind of things. Particularly in our case, as I lost my wife to suicide. And suicide carries with it so much stigma and so much misunderstanding that families are often just completely torn apart by this. We had the opposite. We were torn apart as individuals, but as a family, it's brought us much closer together. And my father and I are much closer together. And we were talking about that this morning, about how much that our relationship is the best it's ever been. We talked this morning about we talked about my son, Kyle. He's my younger one, who's going through the process of applying to these jazz schools, and the struggles we're having with that, getting him prepared, and all kinds of other things are coming up all the time. And he is the same for me too. As I mentioned earlier, we were talking before the show about Jeff Beck's death, and how he had died from meningitis. My mother had meningitis and is in a reduced capacity now. And that's difficult for my father, and me being able to support him through this process is very important. So for us to have this specific time at 7:30 in the morning, we meet and we walk for about an hour and a half. And it's written in stone now. Like unless one of us is sick, my dad's 86, 87 now. I don't know how long. And I lost my wife's mother in October, suddenly. And she was the one of my kids had 4 grandparents still alive. And she would be the one that we would have thought would have lasted the longest. And she died just completely suddenly through some heart trouble. And it just makes you realize that you don't know how much time you've got left. So, this is the time, it's always this way. The time to tell people that you love them is now. The time to be with people is now, because we don't know how much time we've got.
I just, and I'll give it back to Drew for a few moments, but there's so many, we could just spend our whole conversation just on that, but there's so many things in that. I love how you said the time to tell people that you care is now while they're here. And one of my mentors a few years ago introduced me to something called a living eulogy. And I asked him, Robert, what do you mean by that? And he said, don't you notice a lot of times people say what they have to say to someone at their eulogy when they really should be saying it while they're alive. So I think that's amazing. And another thing that stuck out with what you just said, isn't it interesting that you're helping father your father? And I think that's something that a lot of fathers may not realize they may have to do one day.
Sometimes it's a lot sooner.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
with my kids, I don't know what I'd do without them. Because people talk about being a single parent is difficult, and being a single parent is difficult. And I know all single parents have different challenges, but it's different being what I call an only parent.
What can you just differentiate that for our audience? Because some of the, oh, what's Mike talking about?
Well, a single parent is a parent that has, perhaps they have custody of the child and the other parent comes and takes them for the weekends, or they have shared custody. They're all single parents. There's no one that comes and takes my kids away for the weekend. I have my kids all the time. I am the only parent left because I'm the only one left.
Wow.
I know it's more usual for that to be the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And as a dad, it's also interesting. Drew, you had asked about and I kind of didn't talk too much about it, about being the early part of parenthood. I know my wife, there was a lot of mental health issues in my wife's family. She had two sisters who also died by suicide.
Wow.
And when I had Jake, my first son, I was so I've known my wife's family since I was 10 years old. So this is someone that I had a relationship going back for over 40 years. And when her second sister's death was right after we got back from our honeymoon. And I think one of the things that kind of got her through was the love in our relationship. And when we had Jake, I had postpartum depression, which is something that isn't talked about too much. I felt like my life had ended, that I had no me left anymore. And I think it was also tied that I felt so weak. I felt that Lisa, who's dealing with the loss of her sisters, was being so strong, and there I was falling apart. So, and it's something else, and it kind of ties into all this stuff about stigma, about mental health. I know one of the other businesses I run is called Rainbow Songs, and we do music programs for little kids. And they had reached out to our organization to find fathers who had suffered from postpartum depression, because it's not something that's talked about. Men have got to be strong, no crying, no emotion, just be strong, they say to men, right? And I said to Lisa, I said, I had postpartum depression, maybe I should talk to them. And she said, no, how's this going to look on you? And man, that's difficult. So she had a lot of difficulty because she grew up, and it's getting better. And that's one of the reasons I like to talk about this stuff, is because the first thing we got to do is start the conversation. Because when Lisa died, she was always the person who was taking care of everybody. She was always and if she found out someone else had mental health problems, she was right in there helping. And then she would maybe share what some of her experience with her. But she was very reluctant to talk about it. People would ask her, do you have any siblings? And she would say no, which really isn't the whole story, is it? And part of that is because she didn't want to have to explain and be judged. Because there's just I think it was worse then, because this is like, we're talking, it would be 24 years ago since her second sister died. And my kids are getting close to the age of their deaths. And so I got to keep my kids alive. We got to keep the conversation. That was one of the first things we said after Lisa died. I was always telling you got to tell, like Jake was getting to get inquisitive about her sisters because she knew she had sisters, but that they weren't alive, and they didn't. She didn't know. They didn't know how that they had died, and we can't keep these things secret. They need to be. We need to put light on it. So when she died, so many people came to me and said, I had no idea she was suffering. She was always the one taking care. She was always the one asking how I was doing. And I think that was some of the way that she dealt with it, was to always be caring for other people. And so as a result, people often, one of the things what you say to people when you see them, they say, how you doing? How you, and if you're suffering from severe anxiety and depression, you don't want to say how you're feeling. And if you do, and you tell people, it's like if you have a broken leg and you've got a cast on, people can see what the matter is with you. If you have mental illness, what are you going to do? Wear a t-shirt that says, I have mental illness? People are going to walk. Currently, people will just probably cross the street to be away from you.
Mhm.
So people suffer alone. There was not many people that knew what Lisa was going through. It's really difficult.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I just want to say thank you very much for bringing this up, talking about it, making it clear that these are things that people struggle with, and that there is a problem, that it's not safe to discuss it. Because when you say stigma, that means like, oh, well, I can't talk about it because, how's it going to look on me, or what are people going to think? And thankfully, I think we've begun to see a shift. This month we have Bell Let's Talk Day. We've seen Movember doing some, especially through the pandemic, connection, reaching out, asking how are we doing, having these real conversations. And so this is something that I think is very important. From what you shared, I just want to say there's a lot of strength, the amount of resilience, and that you've demonstrated to be able to still be here, but to be able to have this conversation and talk about it. That's a lot of pain that you have gone through and your family's gone through. And I just want to, acknowledge how strong, because I know you said you felt weak, but how strong you are, and how big of a difference, you're making for your kid, your sons, but also for anyone else who hears this message and can start to have these conversations. I just think it's so important. So I just want to acknowledge us again, say thank you. I do want to ask, you are still here. You're talking about this. You're investing in your sons. You're investing in the relationship with your father and your family. That takes a lot. So how did you get here? Because I'm sure there are moments that are probably still hard for you, but in the hardest times, how did you keep going? What was it that enabled you to kind of be here where we are today?
Oh man. I guess the love for the people that are still around me.
Hmm.
Like, I love my boys. That's the only, I don't know, without them, I don't know what I would have done, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah.
My
And I think that really speaks to one of the things that we know from research is that when, when men become fathers, it gives them like a renewed sense of purpose sometimes. And I can only imagine what would be a greater purpose in the midst of what you went through than to be there for your sons. So it makes perfect sense. Ed.
Yeah, Mike, I know you probably have, and I know you do it a lot, and I think you're a great example that you tell your boys you love them.
Oh man, every day. Sometimes, you know what I do? I go through all people. It'll be like, 10 or 12 people. I just text them I love them, to my
Mm.
nieces and my nephews and my parents. And
It reminds me of a number of years ago, I was watching Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, and he has some children, and like they asked him on this program, what do you want to leave fathers with? And he said, lead with love. So thanks for bringing that, for not only through yourself, but all the fathers and those who love with them. I just amplify what you're saying, lead with love.
I've also led with tears.
It's part of love.
It's a big part of love. And, this idea that, men shouldn't cry and that sort of thing. My kids have been thankful. And actually, I have to thank my dad too for that. My dad is also someone, he cries easily, or not easily, he cries freely. He doesn't keep it bottled up inside him. Your tears are, when you're going through things that are so difficult, your tears are an expression and a release of that pain and suffering. And if you keep that pain and suffering inside yourself, it will rot you out. And I've seen it firsthand. So I've never hid that from my kids. Like when Lisa died, we said, we've got to talk about this. And my kids have been so thankful that I don't try and hide that from them. When I'm suffering, I show them that I'm suffering and I tell them that I love them, because I know for them it's hard, because, you can imagine, Kyle was 14 when Lisa died, in his first year of school, and then the pandemic hits. The isolation is unbelievable. Who other kids at school can understand what he's going through? So we have to be there for him. He needs, and the other thing is, like, the first thing I did is I've got to get quality therapists for everybody. And not to be afraid of that, and for them to get comfortable with talking about their emotions and feelings. As men, this is the tricky thing. Like, suicides, I think it's 75 or 80% of suicides are men.
Yeah.
And it's like bottling up of what's inside you. That's what.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because one of the gentlemen who first mentored me when it came to helping fathers and dads, he said that in North America, people over the age of 40 that commit suicides, 80% are men. And he also said the same thing, the same stats for young teenagers, young boys.
Yeah, it's something that is very important, and the message of Mike of what you're bringing is so important. The not only leading by example, in terms of being willing to freely express your emotion in a way that is healthier for yourself and allows it to come out, but then also is supporting your sons in being able to do that as well, getting them the help and that they need, that's going to show them how to do this for their well-being. And so many people are afraid. How many times we hear, well, I'm not talking to anybody, maybe a partner says, hey, could we go and talk with somebody? But like, no, you can go for counseling. I'm not. That's something that really needs to change in terms of what matters most is how can you be healthy in your entire body, not just physically, but how can you be healthy emotionally? How can you be healthy mentally? How can you be healthy physically? And so that's just part of it. And you are leading by example. You're doing it for yourself, walking, building healthy relationships, purging those unhealthy emotions or processing them, and then showing your sons how to do that, and then leading them through that. I just want to say it's so important. And I just want to commend you for the work that you've done, because it's, I can't imagine what you've gone through, yet you have done it and are here today with a very powerful and important message that I think everyone needs to hear.
Wonderful. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I also want to just bless you too, that the love that your father has given to you, you're passing on to your sons. So it's generational. That fathering, he fathered you with love, and know you're fathering your boys with love. I think that's beautiful.
He also has a very direct relationship with my boys.
There you go again.
We were just away on our first vacation together, traveling on a plane and going away. We got away to Costa Rica, which was great. But my wife died over Christmas. And so we wanted to get away over Christmas. We didn't quite get away over Christmas, but we got away right after. And we knew that there would be some difficulty traveling like that without her, the big emptiness, all those tables set for 4 at the resorts and things like that. But what the tricky thing was when we got back and you return back to life again without her. And I know Jake was really excited about getting back, and I was too. But then it kind of all hit us all when we got back again. And this is, we're over 3 years in, and I know that Jake was feeling it and reached out to my dad. They had a big heart to heart, and Jake came up to my studio and sat right behind me, and he was just bursting with tears. After in the morning, we had walked the dogs together, and he said, "Oh, I'm so happy about being home." And then, by the evening, it wasn't the same situation. And Kyle, who has sometimes difficulty talking, also, my dad is a safe place for them. And because sometimes you need to have a step away from your own dad. And my sister also is another safe place for all of us. And we've been leaning on each other really heavily. And to have that connection cross-generationally for my kids, to have that support with my dad has been invaluable to me and to my boys, and back and forth for all of us.
Yep. Mike, can you pinpoint what's enabled you and your family to stay and come closer together through this, as opposed to get torn apart?
Openness. It's unfortunate. I guess part of it for me is I feel like because I've lost, for some reason, another family friend of ours when I was about 10 died by suicide. There's been so many suicides around me, and I've kind of had this slow exposure to things, and to lose Lisa's first sister as a friend, and to lose the second sister as a sister-in-law, and to see what worked and what didn't work. It brought us closer together. I think it helped me have a path that seemed to make sense. It's not a pleasant, that's why I also want to talk about it, about my story, so people can not have so much tragedy to try and avert these kind of things. I feel like this process, I feel I'm now a more patient and more caring person than I was before Lisa died. It makes me sad because I feel like I could care for her better now, and to learn what it's like for her to lose people that are close to her by me losing her is a difficult way for helping me understand her suffering. But like, it's a valuable thing to have. I don't wish for other people to have this, but it helps us survive.
Mm-hmm.
Drew?
Well, Mike, I again want to acknowledge the strength, the courage that you have demonstrated to lead your family through this, to be honest and open about what you're going through, and to see on the other side growth, and see relationship coming together. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that. And that's so important, and that's one of the best gifts you can give your family and give your sons. And so I would love to have you finish off that conversation with maybe some advice, or just one thought for anyone who's listened, who's going through any type of loss or suicide experience, or knows anyone who's going through that. Because I think that is the most important to take from this conversation, from anyone who's listening. That's kind of my thought. Ed, what are your thoughts?
I'm good with that. I'm more than good like that. I think that we need to stay where we are.
Yeah.
And especially the importance, not only just giving respect to Mike and his family, and also other dads and families that are going through this. We want to be a support for them. So I think staying where we are is going to be the most positively effective for everybody.
Yeah. So why don't you then hop in, Ed, after, because from the recording perspective, I'll have acknowledged Mike for his strength. Why don't you take us home with a question to allow
Advice
Mike
for
to share
others?
his insight.
Yeah.
Advice.
So Mike, first of all, I want to bless you. Second of all, if any fathers, no matter what age, are going through even a 1% of what you have and maybe sometimes still are going through, what words of wisdom can you share with them?
One of the things that, because there's so many things that people say to you when you go through something like this. These things like time heals all wounds. Be strong. Neither of those things are true. I don't know what be strong means. Does be strong mean hide your emotions? I think that's what it means, that you got to show your strength. I think showing your strength is showing your vulnerability, showing what you're going through. And as far as time healing all wounds, it doesn't. Like something like when you are, grief is something that you need, especially something like suicide grief, which is so complicated, you need to make friends with it. You need to absorb it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. I would talk to people that I felt like I was just on the edge of an abyss and that I was falling into it. There's no way around it. If you try to push it away and push it down, it will come back. It will keep coming back. The only way is to incorporate it into yourself and learn to carry it with you. As time goes on, like years ago, because it's been a few years for me now, like I still have days where I cried this morning. It was something that like just made me kind of happy, but it was that Lisa couldn't be here to experience it. And so you need to be able to absorb it so that you can carry it with you. You need it. It gives you become stronger, but you need to be able to, it never goes away. It's something, how can you ever not feel pain about something like this? It's like, I can imagine, what Lisa's parents, how they feel to lose 3 children like that. That kind of suffering never goes away. You need to be able to acknowledge it. If you don't acknowledge it, there's going to be trouble. You need to be open with people. If the people around you can't accept that, you need to find people that do. It can be difficult. I'm lucky to have those people in my family. I know a lot of people aren't. I know I'd go to some groups and there'd be people who maybe lost someone else to suicide and the family's calling it a heart attack or a stroke, so they don't have to deal with it. That's not healthy for anybody. And I know for me, I think it's the only way to move forward in a healthy way, to talk about these things and to be able to carry it with you.
Thank you. Drew?
Yeah, Mike, I just want to again acknowledge how strong you are and how powerful your story and your willingness to be open and share it with us and with our listeners has been for me. The example of you reaching out to your dad and now having these every week walks is something that's I want to do that myself. I'm inspired to take that step of building that regular connection. And so I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for just your willingness to venture into these hard places, knowing that there's a hope on the other side.
Thank you. And if people want to find out more about you, Mike, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I hope they do. I know that Howdytoons.com is where you can get anything about the music that we create. I know we didn't talk too much about that today, but I think the message was a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But actually, a lot of the stuff that Howdytoons is about is connected into these kind of things. The story that Dinostory tells is a story. It's a story that there's a lot of loss in too. It's something that in Howdytoons, because of the experiences in my life, I've included a lot of stuff in the stories that doesn't hide away from difficult emotions. I know I used to get a lot of comments on the YouTube videos that their kids were crying when they watched the videos. I know some of the main characters in the main story of Dinostory die. And which is doesn't happen very often, though used to happen more regularly. Everybody remembers that, Bambi gets orphaned like in the first scene of Bambi, right? That's not the kind of thing we put in stories much anymore. So, but there are kids out there that this happens to, and I know I get these comments. The parents initially were complaining that their kid was crying, and then they'd come back and put another comment and say, I want to thank you guys because you're creating content, and that I realized that my kid keeps coming back and keeps crying at this video. And the reason they were doing it was because they were working through some grief of their own. And this all happened before Lisa died. And I was kind of worried about when that stuff came out. But as it turned out, I talked to my manager at the time and said, this is a YouTube manager. I said, what are we going to do? These kids are crying when they're watching the videos. And he said, this is amazing that the kids are actually connecting with it on an emotional level. So not that all the stuff is like that on Howdytoons. It's mostly pretty happy stuff. As I have to say, most of my life is happy. It's just that, when love is so powerful too, like we don't realize that the others, that joy and suffering are kind of two sides of the same coin. The deeper the love, when you lose someone, the deeper the suffering is of that loss. And I was very lucky to have a love that was so big with Lisa. And, it kind of gets tied back to that again. But again, it's howdytoons.com to check out our content. And hopefully people will be able to discover that stuff there.
Fantastic. Before we let you go, I'm going to jump off a bridge here in a good way. This morning I read something, and because of this conversation, I just want to share it. I hope it's appropriate to someone out here, but I read this morning saying, a book I read says, they use a word called meekness. And men don't want to be meek and weak. They want to be strong and in control. But you see, that's exactly what meekness is. Strength under control. So I just wanted to bring that. Nothing just happens. And I thought, just from my heart, that's the way I wanted to just end my time with you today. And thank you for the continuing inspiration, not only for your dad, for your kids, and for others. We're really blessed to have you here. And thank you for all you have done, are doing, and will be doing. And definitely looking forward to continuing the journey with you and for you and with your kids and your family. So thank you so much. Bless you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Drew. I appreciate you guys, your candor and having me on today.
We're better because of it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Mr. Drew, great conversation today.
Yes, and very relevant, given, I referenced Bell Let's Talk Day, bringing awareness to hard topics, hard issues, difficulties that we all go through, but may not feel comfortable enough to actually bring forward. And so it takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength to do that. And so I just want to encourage, if you're listening, there are people available to help and support you wherever you're at, whatever you're doing. And it's actually not a sign of weakness; it's a sign of strength to reach out for help. So please do so if you need it, and you'll get the help, the support that you need through difficult times, because it makes a big difference. So yeah, very important.
Yeah, there are definitely services online and toll-free phone numbers in Canada and the US. If you're a man or anybody going through a challenging time, I think there's even in the United States, they've actually got down to 3 numbers that you can either do text or call, but there are toll-free numbers in both countries and around the world. And if not, call 911. So just want to end. Go ahead, Drew.
I think the other message to say is that there are people who love you, who need you, and who value you. So remember that as you work through this.
Yeah, and if your father's still around, if you can do it, if you can't take that walk, do that phone call. That's what I do with my dad every day. And if I don't call him, he'll call me and say, what do? You disown me or something? So that it's so important, because every father has a father. The question is, where is that father? We end off, as always, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is positive impact, and we really experience that today during our conversation. Now, contact us via email, podcast@dadcentral.ca. Tell us who you'd like on. Give us feedback. You know, we love it. We want to hear it. We keep on bringing epic conversations. We want to hear who you want and how you feel about this great show. Also, if you want to listen or watch, go to dadcentral.ca/podcast. Like, comment, please. We love the feedback. And then lots of free resources on the Dad Central website, dadcentral.ca. And as always, we like to say thank you for watching. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. We'll see you soon. Take care and be well.